Glen, how are you, mate?
Good, good. How are you?
Good. Now a better time?
Yes, yes. I'm home. I've finished work, so I'm
You
here.
uh, you run a restaurant, don't you?
Yeah, well, I'm one of four partners in a restaurant here in
Okay.
Moora,
Yep.
in the mountains. Yeah,
And getting everything ready, I suppose, to reopen.
yeah. We're going to reopen tomorrow night, so you know, once you've been away for a week, you've got a bit of catching up to do.
Yeah,
So we've been,
absolutely.
yeah. So what have you been up to? Much?
Oh, trying to keep out of trouble, mate. Do the best I can. Doesn't always
That
succeed.
sounds
Um,
like a hard job.
well, yeah, it can be when you do what I do. I had a tooth pulled last week. That's been a bit of a shock to the system. It took 2 hours to get the bugger out. It was
Oh,
not in a hurry to come out. It was one of those molars down the bottom jaw there,
oh,
and
yeah. That sounds like a bit of a trial.
yeah, it was. I had 6 hits of anaesthetic before they finally got it to a point where he could give it enough force to get it out. But he had to drill it and chisel it and drill it and lever it.
Oh
It
God.
was pretty ordinary, but I found my zen in the end and just chilled out while he got it done, and eventually it was out and it's
Yeah.
slowly healing up.
You got to do something under those circumstances, don't you? You got to get a different mindset.
Yeah, $640 later, I was free of my last amalgam tooth. But anyway, that's I can still talk and I can still chew, so I'm lucky than a lot of people out there in the world, that's for sure.
Sure, that's right.
Now your sighting, mate, when was that?
That was in the late 90s.
Okay.
I can't exactly remember when, but it was before the aquatic centre was built. It was around there next to the what was then called the Catalina Park. It used to be a raceway.
Now this was up near
Nowadays,
Katoomba, wasn't it?
yeah, it's in Katoomba.
Yep.
Um, Nowadays, it's called the Gully because it used to be an Aboriginal settlement there, and in 1957 they shifted the Mons so they could build this racetrack. So
Okay.
the local Aboriginal people that were here had settled in that little part, sort of like a bit of a shanty town, but it was theirs.
Yeah,
but
like
but
most
the
things.
the town businessmen and the local council, in their wisdom, thought they'd be better off bulldozing their settlement and turning this thing into a raceway. So
Yep.
that's what happened. But it's since been, since I don't know the 80s, I think, or the early 80s, it's been abandoned and it's been given back to the Aboriginal people. So it's quite a big
Oh, well,
deal.
that's a good ending for a sad story.
Yeah, the remnants of the raceway are still there, and that's where the entrance to that area is where I saw this animal.
Okay. Now, I've had a good look at your email and everything, and you're happy with me recording this? This is okay?
Yeah, well, that's fine. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, I hit record before I rang you, so everything's going down in the interview from here on, sort of thing. So,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
fire away, mate. Tell me about the day you had this sighting. What happened?
Oh well, it was really part of my routine. I was just shooting some hoops. Where the aquatic centre is now used to be an indoor basketball and also an outdoor basketball area, and so I was just there by myself. The centre wasn't open, so I was just on the outside courts shooting hoops, and it was getting dark, so I packed up and got into my car and started to leave, backing out of the car park, and which was just in those days, it was you just park up against the fence of the raceway, Catalina Raceway. And as I was backing out, I saw this animal coming across the paddock that was to the west of that complex, and nowadays it's a car park for the aquatic centre, but back then it was just a paddock. And I saw this animal coming towards me, and it looked, to me it was a wallaby coming towards me, because it was bounding up and down. It looked exactly like a front on. It looked exactly like a wallaby bounding across the paddock.
Right.
But as it got closer to me, it changed direction slightly to my right, and I could see it side on. And I realised it wasn't a wallaby at all, but something else, something dog-like. But the way it moved was what really stopped me in my tracks. You know, I kept parked there. I had the engine running and the lights on as it was getting dark. It was on sort of twilight. And,
sure.
So this thing, the way it moved it sort of had this. It's like it was like a small horse or something, but very exaggerated, very this rocking, sort of bouncing trot that it had, which I've never seen any animal move in that way. So I was really checking it out, and then it stopped. It stopped right in front of the car at the entrance of the raceway, where there's a small gate, and it just stopped there, and it was right in my headlights. And just so peculiar, because, you know, I've never seen an animal actually do that either. It was really like the car was so close to it with the engine running and the lights on it, and it just ignored both the car and the sound. It was like I wasn't there. Anyway, it stopped, and then I had a really good look at it, and it was just the most bizarre looking animal. Its body looked like a dog, but its tail and its head were definitely marsupial like. You know, the head resembled a possum's head, and the tail was bushy like a possum's tail, with a white tip on it. It had dark brown hair, short hair all over it, no stripes, but definitely dog-like, definitely a marsupial. And I wasn't even thinking thylacine. I was just looking at this thing because I couldn't tell what it was. I could tell it wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. I could tell it wasn't a dog or a fox, and that it was just some other form of animal that I'd never witnessed. So it stood there for a few seconds, and then it cocked its leg and had a piss on the post of the
just to show its content.
Yeah. And I thought, oh God, it's a dog, but it wasn't. Because it didn't resemble anything like a dog, but it had this mannerism that, you know, was unmistakably dog-like.
Because dogs like to cock their leg and piss on things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was the identical type of archetypal dog pissing on a fence, you know.
Yeah.
But the way the thing looked, it didn't resemble any sort of dog that you could imagine. You know, it was, especially the head. That this is the thing, and in proportion to its body, the head was quite small.
Okay.
And very, very possum-like, big. You know, like how some possums, they've got those dark, bulgy eyes.
Yeah.
It had those, and the head very small in proportion to its body.
Was the muzzle on the head, you know, particularly long to make it look like a dog?
No, it wasn't particularly long. It was pointy. It was long-ish, but it wasn't, you know, it probably in proportion with what a possum's snout would look like if it was, you know, if that's all you saw.
Sure.
I just couldn't believe how possum-like the head was. The head was very dark, though, probably slightly darker than the body. And but the body itself was very whippet-like, you know, like larger in the chest, tapered off to the end, but the animal was quite small, like a small dog, but in height.
So if you compared it to a breed of dog, what sort of size would you compare it to as far as dog breeds go?
I'd say a whippet. I'd say it'd be the same size as a whippet, small.
Yep. But
it
kind of lithe as well, like a whippet.
Yeah, light like a whippet, but it didn't have that exaggeration of the body shape. It had that shape, but it wasn't as exaggerated. It was more robust, I guess.
Okay.
But only slightly more. I mean, it was a lightly built animal, and so I mean, I've looked at plenty of footage and images of thylacine. So it departs from that animal quite significantly in a number of respects. It doesn't have stripes. It's got this bushy tail. It's got this much smaller possum-like head.
Yep.
But the body did resemble that thylacine body, that shape it has.
But it wasn't a stereotypical looking one by no means.
Tapering from the chest to the hindquarters,
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a really good look at it, and at close range, and I'm certain of what I saw. It wasn't like I saw it at a distance and I thought I had a clear look at it, and I know this thing exists, or at least existed up until the time I saw it.
Yep.
And hopefully one day, some sort of discovery will prove me right. I know that on the, it prompted me to research a little bit about thylacines on the mainland, and they were fairly diverse.
Yeah, there was about 6 or 7 types on the mainland, according to the fossil record.
Yeah, and I suppose the most intact one, probably more closely. I sort of got excited when I came across the Dixon thylacine discovery, because it was around about the same size as the one I saw, and maybe it's that animal or related to it or something. Perhaps.
Yeah. The one.
Who knows? It's all speculation.
Yeah. I mean, it's all speculation when you've got a sighting, because you haven't got a physical thing to have a look at and examine. But the fact that you're describing something that was thylacine-like, but not a typical thylacine, is unique. It's and you've had a good look at this thing.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm just hoping someone else has seen it and will, put their hand up and say, "Hey, well, I saw this too." But
there's been a lot of sightings of a lot of weird things up around Katoomba over the years. It's not unusual. This is the first time I've actually had a description of what you're describing given to me, but that doesn't mean anything. I know that what's his name? Gary Opert has quite a few sightings from up around there, as well as Rex Gilroy as well.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Rex was originally from that area, I believe. He was from Katoomba.
Yeah, well, when I first came up here, he used to run something called the up near the Three Sisters there, the Yowie Research and UFO Centre, which is under the kiosk that's there now. There's a big complex there now. He's moved on many years ago, but he used to have this little shop, like a museum.
Oh, yeah.
He'd have Yowie footprint casts, and he'd milk funnel web spiders on the hour, and so it was quite entertaining to go there.
Yeah, he's quite a character. I've never spoken to him before, but I believe he's getting on a bit now. He'd be in his 80s, I think.
Yeah, I think he's fairly not as mobile as he used to be.
Yeah, but I remember seeing him in the Australasian Post and the People magazine many times as a kid, and I was always fascinated by it.
Yeah. Look, and I know there's been a lot of Yowie sightings up here. So, not that I've ever been, a party to that. But,
yeah.
That's the thing. I've had this one thing, and of course, that's why I'm obsessed. It's like anybody who's ever seen something. They're not really terribly most people aren't terribly interested in anything except whether it be a UFO or a strange animal or whatever it is. They're not much interested now in anything but the thing that they've seen. So that's
because it's so profound when you do see something unusual like that.
Yeah, so, from time to time I obsess about it and go, but there's not much information out there that kind of connects me to this sighting, So, but I keep vigilant. Now and then I scour the Thylacine, news updates and so on.
Sure. Gary, when I met Gary a few months ago, 6-7 months ago now, I went to his house and interviewed him for a couple of days. It was awesome. He had a sighting on the road between Brisbane and the Gold Coast back in the late 60s of something with a bushy tail that ran in front of his car. But he was of the mind that it was a Thylacine, which is a marsupial lion, which also has been described to look like a kind of oversized possum by a few people, but rather ferocious compared to a possum. So, it's just that you're giving me this dog-like body shape with a possum head and a kind of a bushy possum tail. So it could be another species of animal altogether,
Yeah, look, it's such a huge wilderness, that don't really...
Yeah, the Blue Mountains, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And beyond, I mean, this dividing range is, probably houses so many species that have yet to be discovered.
That's very true.
Possibly.
Gary Opit's got some amazing sightings information from far north Queensland of things that are meant to have been extinct for a very long time.
Yes.
But, it's very remote, inhospitable country. There's every chance that there could be lots of different things out there that we just don't know about,
Yeah, I don't know much about Gary Opit, is it?
Yeah, Gary Opit, yeah.
Yeah. Would you mind sending me through some info on that?
Are you on Facebook?
He's on Facebook, is he?
Yeah, he's on Facebook. He's got a thing called Strange Encounters UFOs. I think he's got a couple of pages on Facebook. He's pretty open and very approachable, man. He's a great guy. He's a really nice fella. So if you wanted to report your sighting to him, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to hear from you.
Sure. Well, I can just probably forward on the one that I sent to you.
Yeah. By all means, do. He'll love it. He'll love it. But he's more into the UFO stuff at the moment. I think he's stepped away from the cryptid stuff a little bit.
Right.
He has been posting quite a few really good news clippings in our group on the Thylacine Awareness Group over the last few weeks. And they're all regional from that part of the world as well. So when you see the guy's library, it's just amazing. He's got the most amazing book collection I've ever seen. It's fantastic. It should be a museum, his library.
So he lives in Katoomba, does he?
No, he's in northern New South Wales. He's a bit further north than Katoomba, but he's got a lot of New South Wales sightings data because he's in that state,
Right, yeah.
He's got heaps of Yowie stuff and little people and all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah. I've kind of looked at that as well. I'm sure that's true, all of that stuff.
Well, most myths...
People have seen them.
Yeah, most myths have a basis in fact, and, that's... Even some scientists are starting to acknowledge that as well, So, it's not to be scoffed at. I don't mind people not believing or being sceptical, but, people have these very real experiences and they need to be documented and investigated to the best of our abilities, I believe. So,
yeah, that's right. I don't know how you would investigate this particular one, but
yeah, well, it's a random sighting, really, but it's still worth documenting by all means. What sort of distance were you from it when you had your headlights on it?
Look, I was only a few meters, like 3 or 4 meters away from it. It was really close.
And how long did it stand there blinded by the light for while you were looking at it?
wasn't even as if it was blinded by the light. It was like it didn't even register with it. It didn't look at the lights, or it didn't look at me or the car. It just was sort of interested in what it was doing.
So it paid you no heed.
Sorry?
It paid you no attention at all, really. It was just there when you were there.
No, that's right. The fact that the engine was running and the lights were on, it seemed to be of no consequence to it at all. I don't know. To me, it's sort of, in some ways, is typically marsupial as well. I mean, it's a bit the way how possums will relate at night if you come towards them. They also have this thing about, it's as if you're not there, and you might give it a bit of food, and the food appears, and the food, but they don't really seem to, not like a mammal will sort of have eye contact or have some kind of acknowledgement. You know, you can see it in the behaviour that you're there, but often marsupials don't have that kind of rapport. Some do a little bit.
Yeah.
But this was really exaggerated. It was like it was not really concerned, and maybe that's because perhaps, and once again I'm speculating, maybe it's because it's, you know, in its niche, it's an apex predator, and it doesn't really have any concerns about other.
A lot of thylacine sightings, people do say it wasn't really concerned with us. It just went about its business. It didn't even look at us. It just kept going. I got a sighting from South Australia from the very early 70s of some fencing contractors, and they were having a cup of tea in the morning at their camp. You know, they were set up there with their camper and just having breakfast, and this thing came out of the grass trees, walked straight through their camp with its nose to the ground on a scent, didn't even look at them, just walked straight through their camp. It was only 10, 20 feet away from them.
Yeah, that seems consistent.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, so there it is.
That's fantastic, mate. I really appreciate that.
No, look, I really appreciate being able to air it with, I guess, somebody who's got an interest in the whole field, because, you know, you don't have many opportunities to share something like this without, I mean, most people, and I don't blame them, sort of react, okay.
Yeah.
So sort of thing, you know. And, because it's all just hearsay, I guess, as far as they're concerned. But
yeah, but like you probably saw this thing for a good 20, 30 seconds at least, yeah?
Well, that's right, because I got to observe it from a distance, and I observed it from front on. I observed it running from front on. I observed it running from side on. I observed it stopped, and then as it kept going, I got out of the car and observed it from the rear going away. So, I mean, I saw so many different aspects of this animal.
Yeah.
And all of them were totally out of, you know, in another dimension as far as it resembling anything I'd ever seen.
Sure.
In all respects, in its appearance, the way it behaved, the way it moved, everything was very unique.
Yeah, no,
that's the only way I can put it. It's a bit hard to really convey it all, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, that's why I wish someone else would see it, just to experience this bizarre thing, you know.
Yeah. No, I can totally understand that. That's that sort of would give you a little bit more relief, I suppose, if someone else saw something that was, you know, something similar at least in what you've described.
Yeah, although I'm grateful that I saw it at all, and in such detail, and for so long. You know, I think, wow, I feel privileged at the same time. You know.
Well, you're part of the club. You might be the only member in that one. I'm not too sure, but I say that to people. You know, you've had a really unique experience, and you're privileged because you've seen something that very few people get a chance to see and know is there. You know.
Yeah.
All three of my
Yeah.
sightings have been a little bit on the just knew what it was, but without full on clarity.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm following my gut, and the more I follow it, the more people like yourself come forward. So
Well, getting glimpses, that'd drive you forward, wouldn't it?
yeah, it does because you're even more intrigued. Then the last one was under headlights, and it had the brightest golden diamond-like eyes I've ever seen on an animal ever.
Right. Was it striped?
No, I didn't see stripes, but I definitely saw these eyeballs. I've seen a lot of animals on the road in my time, especially in Tassie, but nothing like this. And it was low and sleek. I did see the rear end of it as I got up alongside of it, and it ran off the road. And I just saw the long, stiff tail and the back end of it. But I've had 3 sightings with no stripes, so there you go.
Yeah, so that might be even unstriped ones in Tassie, you might think.
Well, there's definitely unstriped ones on the mainland if witness statements or anything to go by. So why wouldn't there be unstriped ones in Tassie, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
But when you look at the footage of Benjamin in the zoo, when he turns on certain angles, the stripes just about vanish.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's all perspective, really, and lighting and time of day. And the Subaru doesn't have the best headlights. But I did have the spotties on it. I did have my LEDs on. But by the time I got right up alongside it, it was just going over the embankment, so I just saw its tail disappear down the side of the road.
Right. Yeah, well, you're in the right place, aren't you? I mean, as far as that goes, I mean, there must be so many of them out there, but probably because of their history, they're probably in deep cover.
Well, there's a lot of thick cover, but I mean, this is the bit that a lot of people who are sceptical don't appreciate, and that is that you only get sightings where you've got people to see them. You know? A lot of people say, oh, you should be down in the southwest of Tassie, that's where they'll be, but, you know, there's not many sightings from there because there's virtually no people in there. And it's really inhospitable country, and it's not the preferred habitat. It's very wet in there. They like dry sclerophyll forest. They like open woodlands. They like, you know, grassy plains where herbivores are feeding to hunt, you know. So farmland is actually preferable for them. They'll run along the edge of the farm paddock in the bush cover and then wear the wallabies down, and then when the wallabies stop for a rest, bang, they've got them, you know. So, you know, there's a lot of variables,
Yeah, so how often do you get out to check that out, to see what you can see?
Oh, more often than a lot of people would have the opportunity, and not as often as I'd like. But, you know, I've got other things happening in my life, and I do this as a hobby, and I try and encourage as many people as I can drag along for the ride to do their bit out in their area. But if you know you've got sightings in your area, then don't drive all over God's creation looking for them. They'll come back, you know. They will come to you. If you stay in one place long enough and you know they go to that area, they will come to you. It's inevitable, I reckon.
Yeah, well, the gully's sort of joined at one point to a sort of nature bridge, I guess you'd call it, into the valley. So maybe that's one of their spots. But you'd think there's a lot of people that go walking around there and push bike riding and so on. You'd think that there'd be more sightings if that was the case. But anyway, it might have just been a one-off.
Well,
perhaps.
Look, like I said before, there's plenty of sightings of unusual animals, including thylacines at Katoomba. There has been several sightings right up there. So,
right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, there has. I remember reading about them through Rex Gilroy and Gary over the years. And ARFA has got records of it as well in their sightings data.
Right.
But I don't get a lot of stuff from New South Wales, but it definitely seems to be on the increase since that Vice documentary came out. A lot more people have come forward from New South Wales, which is great. There's a lady online who's a photographer, Sabine Hanish, and she was up there in the Blue Mountains somewhere. She's seen thylacoleos a couple of times. She got followed by them. She found lots of prints in creeks and riverbeds and stuff. She used to do a lot of walking up there. So she's got some really good photos of prints from that area. She had a photo of a big black thing in a tree, but it was taken with a really old mobile phone, so it was like 1 megapixel in the photo. It was a really bad photo, but you could see there was definitely something large and black up in the tree, and she reckoned that was one of those Thylacine. So look, I don't listen to paleontologists because they've always got their nose under the ground. They don't look at what's on top of the ground. I totally disagree with them with their theories, because just because they haven't found it doesn't mean that it's not out there.
Yeah, well, I got my just desserts when I rang up Tim Flannery and told him about it. He didn't.
He would have just fobbed you off.
He showed me the door, quick smart.
Yeah, that's not the way science is meant to move. You know, that's actually the opposite to what they're meant to be. It's about discovery, and you know, testing that evidence. You know, but a lot of them are narrow-minded and arrogant and rude, and they just live on their opinion and their PhDs and how many times they've been published.
Yeah, that's right. He was didn't appreciate me talking to him about it. So anyway, that made me think, well, I'll never go down that avenue again. So I really haven't talked to many people about it. So this is a real opportunity for me to actually put it down on paper, and because I've got such a vivid memory of it, and I've never gone to this trouble to try and document the whole thing from go to woe, but I remember enough of it to be able to do that. So at least to the extent that I have.
That's fantastic.
And so, you know,
kudos to you,
I
mate.
appreciate the opportunity, and I thank you for allowing me to air that.
No, all power to you, mate. I'm glad that you're happy to come forward and do an interview so I can share it with the world.
Very good.
Awesome stuff, Glenn. All right, mate. Well, look, I'll let you get back to what you got to do there.
Okay.
And
thanks very much, Neil.
That's my pleasure, mate. And if you have any other unusual things, you know, you can call me.
Yeah, and I'll be following what you do and what you discover.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. Let's hope we discover something that's worth proving.
Yeah, and worth preserving too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. All the best.
Thanks.
Cheers, Glenn.
Bye.
Bye-bye.